Hey guys, how's it going? Ghosty Rich here today, and today we're going to be putting a new sub in this S4. It's an Audi 2013 that's new to Tariq. And so, very nice Bang & Olufsen system, but the bass, well, anyone with the Bang & Olufsen systems will probably tell you, if you like a little bit more than your average bass, it's not enough. You get your highs, you get your mids, just not enough lows. So, we're going to get a bigger sub in here. Best way to do that is, of course, I'm going to do this with my headlamp. We'll see if it adjusts. Ta-da! We're going to pop out some of the insides. So first things first, if we can, does this one just slide forward? Or is, yep, there it is. It pops off. There's little poppers just like your mats where you would simply just pop. I'll show you in one sec. If you ever popped your floor mats, you know, you just pop those two, whole carpet comes out. This is going to allow us to get to the battery that's underneath here. So the next thing that we're probably going to want to do is just open this up, because this is where we want to hide our amp. We're going to see if we can tuck it in here or mount it on the front here, but we want to get the amp somewhat in here, keep it nice and hidden and away from water, because the last thing you want is, let's say for some reason the trunk got a leak and you had your amp in there, you don't want an electrical fire. So I try to avoid putting them into there, even though that's where the battery is. Dun, dun, dun. Anyways, we've got this right here. We aren't going to really pop out this whole panel. There's no need. The only thing we got to do is, I'm going to see if there's a screw, but we basically need to access the wiring for the subwoofer from here to wire to our LC2I. Just take off the screw off the top, slide this out. Hey-oh, it's the battery. Wow, it's a big battery. And then we've also got this, pop out our jumper cables. And as you can see, we have even more room in this vehicle. So next thing that we need to do is we're gonna reach our hand in there and try and grab the wire for the subwoofer. Feel the side of the subwoofer, unplug it, and we'll see how far we can get the wire over there so we can solder off of it. All right. I'm looking at the bottom of the subwoofer, and if you look straight up, I'm using my headlamp to light up the connector. See that connector right there? All you do is you squeeze both sides. Come on now, right there. I guess that really helps. That's the sub. That is the connector. Squeeze both sides of it. You have to compress it and slide it out. So, as you can see, I've disconnected the connector. Like I said, all you do is you compress the two sides and you slip out. Now, there's two things we're going to try. One is we might leave the Bauer, sorry, not the Bauer Wilkins, the Bang & Olufsen, two different audio companies. We might keep that sub plugged in, and we're just going to take the signal off of this to feed an LC2I. Now, you might be wondering, why use an LC2I? Why not just use the high level converter off of an amp? And the reason why is this is really good for adding in bass, meaning let's say something has roll off, this will try to fight the roll off, or if it's cutting, let's say, a certain hertz range, it tries to fill in that hertz range so that way it doesn't cut off as early. Now, you can actually adjust how much it adds and doesn't. This allows you as the audio listener to get it to the point where you like it. It's kind of a good thing to have when you're rolling with factory decks, just because of the fact that a lot of the times they just cut off the sub too early with just using the high level output off of an amp. But again, it is an option. You can just do that, but I have always ran an LC2I just for my own use. This is the Hertz new Desi DP 1500. What's cool about this, always ignore this, I don't believe in ever reading that, but what's cool is Hertz will actually tell you on the side it's 350 at 4 ohm or 590 at 2 ohm. Why is that cool? Because the D-Power one, I want to say from last year, D-Power 1 is what it was called. It was like 300 at 2 ohms and like, I want to say 200 at 4? Could have been less. I can't remember. But either way, this one has way better power ratings and will be more than enough to run that Type R. As you can see, you get the small footprint, which is what we want, so we can tuck it away nice and tight. So for our instance, we have a sub, which is mono, meaning we can either tag off of the left or the right if you're using this. Meaning off those two, once I give you the positive and the negative, you would put the positive, which is the solid color, and then the negative, which is a black with whatever color that you're going to use, and you would just go off one. You wouldn't have to worry because you don't need signal off two speakers. But let's say if you were somebody who had to go off of, let's say, the left and the right speaker because you didn't have a factory sub, what you would end up doing is wiring the power off of, or I should say the signal off of the left and the right speaker to the amplifier. And yes, that's basically it. That's the best way to put it. But if you're wiring off of a factory sub location, you would only use one of them if it's not needed, because all you need is the signal from the sub. That's it. If you actually minus the foot off of that, like right where the MOSFET starts, right there, it's literally less than half the size. That's awesome. And it's way more power. So let's go over this amp real quick. Subsonic. This is to cut off frequencies that might damage your sub. It's frequencies that you would feel, but you won't hear. If you wanted to save your sub, you would just turn it on. A lot of people turn that off. I'll leave it up to you. You can leave it on or off. This is so you can set your own filter to turn off when your sub is going to cut in and cut out. This is always nice, especially since it's nicer to do it through the actual amp itself. This is your low pass. This is where it's going to cut off the bass basically from the highs. I usually try to get this as close to 100 as I can, so that way there's a little bit of overlap with the speakers, but again, this is completely up to you. And then from there, phase, this is for which way your sub is facing. If it's facing towards the trunk, just leave it on 0. That's why it's already pumped out. Leave the boost off. I absolutely hate bass boost, but if you really need to use it, go ahead and use it. It's kind of like what the LC2i does, but not as efficient. Audio Controls really mastered that thing. That's why it's a really good piece. There is a newer version, I believe, available. I can't remember what it's called, but it does the exact same thing. Either way, yeah. And then right here, that's just the auto turn on. And then pre-out, leave this plugged unless you're running 2 amps. Just leave that covered up. And then input. If you're like me and you're just using the one mono out of the trunk, then you would go ahead and you only need one RCA. Just make sure you plug it into the side that you put in on there. I'll show you that when we're wiring it up so it makes more sense. I'm just going over the amp right now. Again, if you end up going off 2 rear speakers or 2 front speakers, then you would plug in that piece right there or that piece, and then you would need both RCAs so it grabs and sends sound from both the left and the right channel. I hope that kind of goes over it the best I can. And then again, speaker out goes to your subwoofer, as you can see, and power in from battery, ground. What's awesome? Well, our battery's in the trunk. So we don't really need a whole long power wire, which is why I've got a bunch of power wire scraps from wiring all sorts of vehicles. And that's why I've gone ahead, just bought a separate fuse holder, some A&L fuses, and a small set of RCAs because we don't need to go very far. So this is that tray. Pull out the 2 10 mils. Take a look at that. We can put the amp in there. It's tiny enough. So the only thing is we might have to take off these mounting feet, which we can't really use anyway because there's electronics right below it. You don't really want to be putting screws right down into that electronics board. So I will find a new way to mount this, even if it's to drill holes through here and then mount it through those, or we'll find a way. I'm not too worried, but I want the amp in there. That is going to be such a perfect spot. Power wires and everything will come out that side, and then the adjustments will be over here so we can do it with a small screwdriver. So I took the caps off to see if it would fit in there. It would only fit in there this way, and I don't want to have to pop this in and out or pop those 2 10 mils every time I want to adjust this. If you're fine with that, I mean, technically you could do that. Your power wire will be at a little bit of a bend, but I'll leave it up to you. You could do that, and then again, we're just going to do power and ground right to the battery probably because heck, it's literally right there. So anyways, as you can see, we have everything ready to go. The only thing, like I said, I might do is try to take these feet off just to gain even more room, and then we'll have to find another way of mounting it. but I'll tell you in a second. So see those two 10s up there? We're gonna move that out of the way so we can properly see how we want to secure the amp in there. Once we have the top part up, we'll be good. Now before we do this, I highly suggest we disconnect the negative. So we're gonna come over here. There's the negative battery terminal. We're just gonna go ahead, loosen it off, and wiggle it off. Put it off to the side so there's no chance of reconnection. As for this, I just popped off. This kind of folds away and it pops up. Anyways, pop up that little tray so we have access to our positive for later, because we're gonna have to add on to that. As you can see, we've got a few spots here too where we could probably add on a wire, like right here. If I can find a 10 mil nut that screws onto there, we're totally just gonna thread that on and use that post. Now that being said, if I can actually figure out what the thread is, which is kind of hard, we'll see. But if I can, then I'll let you know it. See that? I cut out a piece, let's see if I can leave this light here, from the tray of this size. Went back here, right there, just like so. Cut it with an oscillating tool, because I want the amp to sit in here, just like so. Just like that. And then from here, now that it's on there, I can figure a way to strap it, because again, I don't want to put screws down because this module sits too close to the plastic. So I want to put a screw kind of here and strap it all the way around. I will let you know how I design that, but exactly that's how I want to do it. You could, if you wanted to, use double-sided sticky, but then it's hexagonal at the bottom, so there's no real way to kind of stick it to the bottom. As you can see right here, we pulled the little lug that was right here. That's so you could actually add in a fuse right there, but we're gonna actually add a fuse onto here and tuck it in, just because, I mean, if you want to try and use that, you can. You could disassemble an A&L fuse and try and get it in between there. Instead, we're gonna go here, and again, we're gonna still see if we can find a nut that will fit. Power goes here, strapped up here, away from all these signal wires, because I don't want to mess with any current patterns in these wires because of the size of power. Came up here, down. All I did is I shoved it in here, reached in here with my finger, and ta-da! Literally, all you got to do is push it into this opening and then pull it down, zap strap it along here, and it's currently sitting right here. You can actually go down and bring it up in between the foam. The ground, well, I'm actually decided not to go off the battery. Why? Because it would be a longer wire. We can't have that. So I'm actually going to have a hydraulic crimper. Go ahead and hydraulic crimp it. If not, what some people do is they'll smash it with a hammer, take a blowtorch, heat it up, and put in butane solder, so that way it won't slip. You can do whichever you want. And then what you do, if you're like, wow, that's way too ugly for me, take some shrink tube, 4 gauge, slide it on over top, and then heat shrink it, and it'll make it look nice and pretty for you. I did this because I am gonna use that lug that was down there. So we're just gonna go ahead and crimp that down on there. Now you can, if you want to, take a little bit of light sandpaper and just clean up if there's any primer on it, just so that way you don't have to worry, but it looks pretty galvanized to me. It looks pretty shiny. But again, you can use that, or what some people will use is steel wool and just clean it up. After you've done so, just put the loop you just made and tighten the 13 back on it. For this particular amp, have about that much exposed copper, so that way that screw's really going to dig into it and pull it into the amp. Again, how you'll know, take the screw all the way out and slide it all the way till it bottoms out. Once it does, you should have no exposed copper. If you see some, trim it back a little bit. So now that we've figured out our lengths, we need to be able to power and ground our LC2I. As you can see right here, it has a positive which has writing on it, and the negative has nothing on it. So go ahead, and we're just going to wrap it around. We're going to wrap the power around the power wire with a very long lead, so that way when we tie that screw in, it's going to hold in the power and hold in the negative side. So we have that. Also tie in the remote and turn off the remote sensing if you're using the LC2I, because I would just use the LC2I to sense
the power going to the amp and still run a remote wire. That way you only have one item trying to sense power. Makes it just that much easier and one less hiccup to happen. So this is that speaker wire. Like I said, just squeeze this away from the metal seam. You'll feel it with your finger. Just squeeze it between the carpet and the metal seam. And as you do, afterwards you can wrap your fingers around, grab it from right here and pull it out. After you do, lift the module up and just see that? Just bring it up and through and over to there. And you can actually just tuck it along the edge, just like that. After it does that, it'll come up and around and we'll put it into the sub box. We've got, again, our speaker wire right here. I'll probably strap that up here just so it's off of our power wire. You don't want that anywhere near the power wire. And again, it just goes over here. This is now loose back there for the sub. We'll deal with that after. These three need to go to our LC2I on the one side. And then after that, all we really have left to do other than to terminate our power is to go off this Bang & Olufsen sub wire, which we'll do last. But first things first, I'll put that piece back on so I can show you. But what we're gonna do is take a Phillips driver and put the remote out to the amplifier, 12 volt and ground from that 12 volt and ground. And then again, we can disconnect that while we're wiring everything up. I always do that so that way I can set my lengths and stuff like that, as long as you know where your audio control is gonna be. If you don't yet, don't cut them to length. Just remember what you did for remote wire, your positive, your ground. Again, since we're dealing with just one, we're gonna go off the left here, and then a left RCA, which will feed. Last but not least, the back end of the amp is wired up. Subsonic is off, filter is on, low pass is set vertically. So that way I know it's at about 100 to 125, and I'll adjust it for its cutoff there for if I hear just the vocals or anything cutting in too early. Bass boost is completely off because there ain't no time for that. This button is pushed out for phase because we're at 0 degree phase. If it was facing towards the driver, you'd want 180. For us, we are facing away from the driver, so we're doing 0. Again, you can play with that depending on what you want. I don't really hear a difference with it. Anyways, level. Up and down. You should have it midway or halfway exactly. That's where you want to be. You really don't want to increase this any further past there. Is halfway is RMS 90% of the time. Of course, there is some adjustment, but if you go anything past 3/4, you're on borrowed time with your amp. I'll leave that up to you. I do not suggest doing that, and it will cause a lot of heat. And then auto turn on is off, and the reason why is because I'm using the LC2I to tell the amp to turn on. If you did not run a remote wire, you're not going to run a remote wire, or you're not going to run an LC2I, go ahead and of course have that pressed in, so that way the amp will sense signal and turn itself on. And then just RCA. I only technically need one, but I bought this small pair of RCAs and I don't want to tape one up or have it jingling around, so I'll just plug it into both, even though it'll just be the left that is live. I'll have to show you afterwards, but I've got a bit of a bend in this, and I actually got it over to here. I reached up, you'll feel a piece of foam. It's just like a liner, and I got my finger just a little bit to the foam, and got my finger through it and was able to grab onto that metal piece. So now we'll have a hidden wire through there. It's a fun fish. You have to fish around the sub. So look at the sub, think of the curvature, take a old coat hanger, a piece of hay wire, or if you have a fish tape, use a fish tape and then just fish it through. This will probably take you the longest. For me, it actually only took me a couple minutes.
Ignore my handle side, but see the curvature? That's exact curvature. I slid it in and moved it around. Like I said, I just put my head inside the pocket up and in here, and I was able to feel in there, and I felt the tip by moving it around and pulled it through. Now that I got that wire through, I can put the speaker wire end for the LC2I on, and I'll get that positive and negative from online, and I'll tell you exactly what it is in a second. So blue yellow, attach positive here, negative goes on yellow white or white yellow. So you would wire that to either your amp's high low. White would be there, white black would be there,
and again, you wouldn't hook up the right. Again, it does not matter because the amp that's built into this car is sending signal to this as a mono, not as a stereo. Anyways, since we are using an LC2I, just go off the left port, and then again, that's just going to come out this one RCA. The right is just basically a blank going to the amp. Doesn't matter because it's a one channel amp, meaning it only works off of one channel. It doesn't actually use both. It just gets signal from both if it requires it. So it's a 1/4-20. I put a washer on it and just put the eyelet on, like I've already showed you how I hydraulic crimped. Just hydraulic crimp it, and then 1/4-20 with a washer, put it on. Now that that's on there, we'll pop the cover back on, make sure it still sits right here. Again, remember there's that nub here, we had to pop that out. Anyways, this just fits right in here. We can now take our plastic cover and it will go in again right about here. Just have to clip it on. Oh, when you go to put this on, make sure you put your fuse holder cap on like this first. And then from there, this guy right here just sits just like so. And we're gonna slide this on. Make sure that rubber gasket's on there. Unscrew the screw all the way. Put it all the way down on. Tighten it down as tight as you can. And then from there, we'll get the other side of the wire ready. So once your rubber's like that, you've loosened this screw, and again, we've got both ends on. The one that you start with, you put the angle through. From there, tighten it on. After you've tightened that, slip the plastic piece on and you can kind of like screw it on. You don't even have to, just slide that into the center. You can screw it on at the end. Then slide this over onto here, tighten it. Completely slide that plastic piece off. After you've done that and both are completely tightened, go ahead, screw down this side, screw down that side, make sure it's flush so there's no movement. It's not so bad with these A&L ones, but if you're doing the little glass tube one where it's got the little glass views, what can happen over time is those back off, and since there's nothing actually screwing the two pieces and holding the centerpiece together, it'll separate and then it'll start arcing the glass tube and can actually cause the holder to melt from heat of the arcing. And just like that, and then press it over, and there it will slip over this nice and tight, and you'll feel it get into the center, and just go ahead and tie these on until that rubber cap is sealed and everything is good. That water tights this whole piece. Just make sure you tighten these down as much as you can. I don't suggest using Loctite. Some people do. The reason why is it can act as an insulator and then it won't make a proper connection, but that's completely up to you. When you're done, it should look something like this. I just used some Velcro, some really strong 3M Velcro, and stuck it to the side of the battery. That way, if the battery ever has to go out, you just pull this off and you just apply another piece of Velcro to the new battery and you're all good. But yep, that's how that's gonna go. And next part is to finish up our amp. I just wanted to get this ready. Now we can put the... So I slipped a zap strap down along the top and through here and did the same on the other side. So I have two zap straps now. So when I put the amp there, I'm gonna actually zip tie it onto that black platform. And you're probably wondering, well, Rich, wouldn't you rather screw it? Well, yeah, but there's just no space, and then there's no chance I want to take of hitting that module underneath. How strong that is? I'm moving the whole thing. It's not moving individually. That works perfect. I can still make my adjustments. I can still do everything I need to from behind. Again, once you really set these, you'll set them and forget them. And if you really were wondering about bass and stuff, you could run a bass knob to the front of the car. Again, we're not going to be doing that, but if you wanted to, you could. I'm going to go ahead and put this module back up, and then we'll find a place for LC2I. All right, screws up tight. Again, not too tight. It's just holding plastic. It's not structural. Same with these. Just tighten them, and like I said, just don't go ham. Well, what I want to do here, I want to put this right here. Now you're probably wondering, oh, Rich, why are you mounting upside down? All right, so left is black. Red is right. That is the way I've always done it, so that way I know. And then this right here is our speaker wire from which we wired in, which is of course the one that goes up top, which is the blue, yellow, white, yellow, which is negative, blue, yellow, which is positive. And then right here is our remote out to the amp. and the 12 volt that we wired to the amp and the negative we wired to the amp. And just like that, we're good to go. And let's do the final touch and make sure it still seals. There.
It was already.
Ta-da! It fits. At this point, if you'd like, just hook up your negative again. This is what I always suggest doing. Put this on, leave this open. Before, you could just hook up your sub if yours is ready. If it's not, you could actually just put the key in and quickly just make sure this fires up. After it fires up, you should see a light glow, blah, 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 and you should see a light from the amp. Then turn the car off. And after you've turned the car off, see how long it takes for the amp to turn off. And make sure the amp and the LCT2I turn off after the signal sensing ends. And I suggest doing that before you hook the sub up, just to make sure everything's working okay. So go ahead and do that. Take out the 10 mil off this fuse rack, slide this forward. If you do and you flip it over, you'll see this fuse or this relay right here. If you do that, you'll see a purple white wire. Test it with a voltmeter just to make sure. We're gonna have to strip that back, and this is gonna be your remote wire. Unfortunately, it doesn't put out enough signal voltage to actually tell the GTO to turn on the LC2I. So we're gonna have to run a wire from this cubby to that cubby. Super easy. Just have to pop this out, and again, you just pop out the 10 mil, slide this out sideways, and we'll quickly run a wire over. I could have shown you this while we were running that earlier. There's actually one other cool thing I'm going to show you in a sec. But first off, lift straight up with this. It's not going to be that easy, but you'll see these. Make sure those metal clips are all still attached. When you pop it out, put that off to the side. See how you can get in here now? Just feed your one wire. We're going to wire to here, into here, out through here, along through here. You can zip tie it just along this, because it's not going to matter. Zip tie it and into here. Once we get it into there, we'll flip this up and do the rest there. But I'll show you the last cool thing in here afterwards. You might not even have to go up to that subwoofer unless you want to disconnect it. The reason why, that's your sub amp in there. From right there all the way down and through here. Now I'm just going to slip that piece back on. I already have the wire right here, from which I will cut to length when I solder, and this will just get cut and put to the remote in. Put this in. Remember, see that piece right there? See how there's a tooth? If you feel right here, there's a little keyhole. Make sure it slides down on the keyhole when you slide this piece back in. All right, as you can see, we've gone ahead, we've soldered this on. I need to put a smaller fuse on this. I know you can tell by the gauge of wire on there. I only had a 30 amp fuse holder. If I were you and you're going to the store to buy this first, buy like a 10 amp, 5 amp, somewhere small like that. Anyways, we've got that in. We're gonna slip this back in, but before we do, let's go in over here. I unwrapped this a little bit so I could show you. This is your factory amplifier, and this, I'm 99% sure after testing, is your sub wire, which is the blue, yellow, and white yellow. So if you don't want to go all the way up to that sub, go ahead and just tag it off of here. Save yourself some fishing and time. Once you've gone ahead, put in that screw or bolt down there, go ahead, turn it on, and make your adjustments. For copyright reasons, I can't actually show you the subwoofer bumping. So that was the install for the S4 Audi 2013. I hope that helped you out. With some of them, it could be a little bit different from which I've noticed, but hopefully this helped you out with your current model.